Hello guys, Smart Paula here, welcome back to another video. So today I will be teaching you guys the basics of using the new Chaos Destruction in Unreal Engine 4. Chaos is Epic Games' new fully dynamic destruction system, currently in beta and only available via a source build of Unreal Engine. If you haven't already watched my Getting Started with Chaos video, go ahead and check it out. You're going to need a source build of the engine with Chaos enabled, so just go ahead and check out that video if you haven't already. Alright, so first up what we're going to go ahead and do is create a brand new project. So just launch whatever version you want. I'm going to be using 4.25. I'm just going to create a first-person shooter game, and I'm not going to include any starter content, and I will just name this Chaos Basics, and then we'll just create the project. So to get Chaos enabled in this project, all we have to go ahead and do is go to our content browser. First we have to create a new C++ class if we haven't already converted this project to C++ so that we can compile it and have the Visual Studio files. Just right click anywhere, click new C++ class, create a blank class. It's going to open up Visual Studio. Once it loads up you can go ahead and close it, and then you can go ahead and close your project. Then what you have to do is go to your project folder. This is wherever your Unreal projects are installed on your hard drive. You can find this by going to your library, Chaos Basics, right click, show in folder, and it will open the folder on your drive. You're going to want to make sure you have the .sln Visual Studio project file, which is again what we just created by adding a C++ class. Then go into your source, Chaos Basics editor.target.cs, right click, edit that. You're going to add 2 lines, b compile chaos equals true, b use chaos equals true. File, save that. Then we can go ahead and switch Unreal Engine version to use the source build at our C drive, which I showed you guys how to do in the Getting Started with Chaos Destruction video. So again, if you haven't watched that, make sure you go ahead and watch that first. Then just go ahead and click OK. It's going to generate the Visual Studio project files, and then you can right click the SLN and open it with Visual Studio 2017. And it should have Unreal Engine right here, the source build, as well as your project Chaos Basics. Make sure this is Development Editor, Win64, right click on your project and click Build. So this may take a couple minutes for it to build, but just let it go ahead and run. Once it's finished building here, you'll see Build 1 succeeded. You can go ahead, right click your project and click Debug, Start New Instance. And this will just go ahead and launch your project here. And once you've basically built your project and done this, you can now just launch your project from the launcher here. So if you want to start up your project again, you don't have to rebuild your project. You can just launch it from here. So if you go to Edit, Plugins, I'm going to search Chaos. You're going to see all of the Chaos plugins are enabled. And there's one more plugin that we actually need to enable that doesn't get enabled by default, and it's actually really important. And it is the Field System plugin. So just make sure you click enable. It's going to tell you to rebuild, but it doesn't really matter. You don't have to do this. Just click yes and restart the project. Alright, once you restart it, research the field. You're going to see it's enabled again. So now we can go ahead and start working with Chaos and the engine. So first of all, let's go ahead and import some geometry that we can use to fracture and to play around with. So I have included this pillar that we can go ahead and use for our project files. Link will be in the description down below to use it. Just go ahead and drag the FBX file, import that. And then for the textures, drag these 2 textures in, open up the material, and drag those in and connect them up. Okay, and then we can go ahead and drag our mesh, our geometry, right into the scene. And you're going to see here it's this pillar. And I'm actually going to make a few adjustments to our scene, and you'll see why I did this in a second. I'm just going to select everything and move it down so that it's flush with the grid. And I'm doing this by holding down the shift. And then we can also go ahead and drag this out of the way, and we can go ahead and set our lighting sources to movable. We can go ahead and delete the reflection capsule. So go ahead and select your column right here, go to the modes, the fracture mode, and this is essentially Chaos at its very basic functionality. You can fracture your mesh into different pieces. That way we can destroy it in game. And to do that, you're going to create a new geometry collection. A geometry collection is basically a collection of all these individual fractures of a mesh. You can have more than one mesh in a geometry collection. You can select multiple items and we'll add it to that geometry collection. Or you can have multiple meshes in a blueprint and create that as a geometry collection. So let's go ahead and name this pillar and create it. So we have different options to fracture our geometry. We have uniform, clustered, radial, planar, slice, brick. We're just going to do the uniform. We're going to go ahead and scale our fracture up to say 200. Click fracture. And as you can see here, it's fractured our mesh. If we drag this explode right here, you're going to see all the different pieces that it created, all the pieces that will basically break apart. And on the left side here, you can see all the pieces right here. Down in the bottom, you can see the level statistics. So you can see at level 0, there's one geometry, which is the brute, and at level 1, we have 194 fractures. To switch between your levels, we can go right here and go to level 0 or level 1. Okay, so right now, if we were to simulate it, it'd be a lot of rigid bodies simulating at once, and you don't really want, this many all at once. So we're going to go ahead and basically cluster these into larger pieces. Before you actually simulate or do anything, you obviously want to save it. 4.25 version of Chaos is actually pretty, is not the most stable build. It's just to be expected when you're messing around with the experimental things. So what we can go ahead and do is start clustering our mesh. To do that, we go to the cluster tab, going to select all, click the auto cluster. This will bring up our auto cluster settings, and the cluster sizes is basically going to determine how many pieces do we want for our level. So if you remember at the start, we had 194. So if we auto cluster, we can bring that down to say 100. So half of what it was. And click auto cluster. You can see it's created a new level, level 1, and it's moved our previous level down to level 2. And you can see here we have much larger pieces and much larger chunks. So we can go ahead and do this again a few more times. Select all, auto cluster. We're going to do half of 150. It's going to create another new level, and you can see the pieces are getting larger. So basically what this is doing, it is allowing us to bring our geometry down to a more manageable amount of rigid bodies that we're going to simulate. That way, we're not simulating 100, 200, or 300 rigid bodies all at once. So I'm just going to do this one more time and bring this, say, down to 10. And so as you can see here, we have all our different levels, level 1, level 2, 3, 4, and 5. And basically what this is an LOD system for destructible meshes. And so you can switch through your levels by changing different levels right here, or you can use the shortcut Shift W. You can also explode the mesh here to see all the sizes of the clusters that we created. Alright, and if you move this tab up over here, you can see in our Chaos Physics, we're going to have some options here, some parameters. And under this clustering tab, we're going to see this damage threshold. The damage threshold directly corresponds with your levels here. So level 0 is level 0 right there. You can add more damage thresholds for each corresponding level. So maybe we'll set this up to like 5,000, 4,000, 3,000, and so on. So it's going to take less damage to break up the smaller pieces, but more damage to break up the larger chunks. So if you move it up a little bit and then hit play, you're going to see it automatically breaks up. So we can go ahead and change our damage threshold here to be a little bit stronger. So let's go ahead and up this to say like 30,000, 25,000, 20,000. Okay, and then we can also go to our geometry collection that we created. So if we right click here, browse to asset, and click on the pillar, we're going to have this little options menu right here. So if we expand our collection, our collisions right here, you're going to first see obviously the materials, but we're more interested here in our settings. We're going to change the implicit type to level set. This will basically make it have to load the geometry every time we open the project. or every time you have it loaded in your disk. We're also going to set mass as density and give it a mass of, say, 2000. Go ahead and hit save for that. And so if we hit play, you're going to see it just crumbles like that. So you can go ahead and play around with these damage thresholds, but that's pretty much the basics of that. Now we're going to go ahead and talk about fields and the different various fields that there are in Chaos. Fields are components that basically allow us to do many different things within Chaos itself. To have fields, you want to make sure you again enable the field system plugin for Chaos, but basically allows you to create a field. So you right click in your folder, go to physics, and create a field system. We can name this anchor field, and then if you try to click on it, it's not going to open up or anything. So what we can go ahead and do is actually drag this into our scene, and then right here, blueprint add/script, we can go ahead and click that, because right now it's doing absolutely nothing. So let's go ahead and add some functionality to it through blueprint. Go ahead and just leave it as it is, anchor field blueprint, and select that. Okay, and we'll open up our blueprint here. Basically, we're going to go ahead and go into the construction script. We're going to add some components here. On the field system component, we're going to add a cube. Since this is an anchor, we're going to add box fall off, culling field, and uniform integer. And then we're going to get our field system component and add field command and hook this up. There are different fields right here. You can see we have dynamic state, which is basically, if you go into the general tab right here, you can see it's simulating as dynamic. We have sleeping, kinematic, static, dynamic, and user defined. So that directly corresponds with some of these as well. So basically a strain can be defined as either a cube or a sphere or a region of space. And you can tell that region of space to either simulate, to be dynamic, or to be static, or to apply some sort of explosion or some sort of force to a certain region. That's pretty much the basics of fields. And if you want to read about the different types of fields, you can go ahead and head over to the Chaos Destruction documentations under the field type. You'll get a description of each field here. The one that we are creating currently is called an anchor field, which is right down here. And basically an anchor field is made up of a few components that tell a certain region of area to be static while the rest can actually simulate. So what we can go ahead and do is grab a culling field, set culling field, hook that up to the field right here, and then we'll go ahead and get the box fall off, set box fall off, hook that up into the culling. For the transform, this is going to define what region of space we want to maintain static rather than dynamic simulation. We're going to get our cube that we have in our scene, get world transformation, and hook that up for the transform. For our field here, we need to get our uniform integer, set uniform integer, hook this up into our field. We're going to create a new variable. It's going to be of the object state type. This is basically enumeration. We're going to name this to static state. So we hit compile. You're going to see under the default value there are different settings here we can choose. We're going to go ahead and click static. We can go ahead and drag that variable into our blueprint. We're going to go ahead and drag this off and go to int and convert that to integer. And then you're going to make sure you set the culling field right here. This is very important. Set this to outside. Now we also need to change this to dynamic state as well. So it adds a dynamic state everywhere outside of this field other than this box. So everything outside of this box is set to dynamic except for this box itself. This is set to static. So this is basically an anchor. This will allow us to anchor our geometry by overlapping it. So this is our anchor field blueprint. And so if we merge this into here and actually scale this up and move it something like that. So right now it's intersecting. So it's going to tell these pieces of geometry to be static while the rest can be dynamic. And before we hit play, we actually need to set this up. So if you click on the geometry, you're going to see initialization fields. It's an array, so you can add an element. And once you add it, you can choose the anchor field or you can actually hit this little sample tool and click on that little box. Okay, so if we hit play now, you're going to see it's not going to fall to the ground. And if we actually go ahead and rotate this, you're going to see it's also not going to fall to the ground. But this is still dynamic, so technically we can still destroy it. So yeah, that's pretty much an anchor field. And now there are various other fields. What we just saw and what we just created, which is the anchor fields. They hold pieces of geometry together. We have cluster strain fields, a force field, so as you can see it blows it up. Then we have fall off and angular torque, noise / culling, sleep / disable. So as you can see here, it freezes the simulation and it disables the simulation. And then we have internal strain, which applies a little bit of strain internally, and you see the building just falls apart like that. Okay, so there are various different fields here, and this is actually the Chaos Destruction demo, but right now it actually only works with 4.23. Like I said, I've tried compiling it with 4.25, it just doesn't work. What I'll probably actually go ahead and do is migrate some of these blueprints out into a 4.25 project for you guys to play around with. But of course, if you guys always want, you can always compile a 4.23 source build and open up the Chaos Destruction demo and see all the different examples here. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and modify our first person gun right here, so we can actually go ahead and blow up or shoot off some of the pieces here of this mesh. So we're going to go ahead and go to our first person BP blueprints, and we're going to go ahead and right click and create a new field system, weapon impact. Okay, go ahead and drag this into the scene and add a blueprint / script, and then drag that to the top, and you can actually go ahead and delete this. So in our blueprint here, off of our field system component, we're going to add a spear collision, and then on the first spear collision, we're going to add a spear in our event graph. Off of the event begin play, we're going to do a sequence. Then what we're going to do is add some components here. We're going to need a radial force. We're going to need a operator field, radial fall off, and actually make sure it's out here and not on these. So go back here to radial vector, random vector, uniform vector, and operator field. Then we're going to get our field system components, apply physics field, hook that up there. Going to enable it. We're going to get our radial fall off and set radial fall off. Hook that up into our field. For our magnitude, we're going to promote this to a variable, name this strain magnitude, pilot, give it a default value of like 10,000. Then off the radius, we'll multiply, float by float. Gonna add 50 on the bottom right here. We're going to get the spear collision, get world scale, and split struck pin. Going to get the X and multiply that by 50. We're also going to get world location and hook that into our position. Going to leave the fall off as none. I'm just going to go ahead and clean this all up. Then we're going to get our field system component and apply physics field. Oh, and then we also want to change this to external cluster strain. Apply physics field, make sure that's enabled. Going to change this to linear velocity, and then we're going to go ahead and give us some space. Get the operator field, set operator field, hook that up into the field. We're going to get our radial vector, set radial vector, the magnitude, pull that off, promote to variable, name that force magnitude. Off the position, get world location of our field system component. I want to hook that up into the right field. Now as for the left field, we're going to get the radial fall off, set radial fall off. Gonna hook that up to our left field here. And we can actually go ahead and just copy what we did over here and paste it for our left field, We can change the fall off right here to linear, and then want to change this from multiply to add. Should be all good there. Finally, we're going to apply another physics field. This last one's going to be angular torque. Go ahead and set the operating field again. And then we're going to get the random vector. Set random vector. Change the magnitude to something like 100,000. Hook that up into our right field. For our left field, we'll get the uniform vector. Set uniform vector. Hook that up to the left field and change the z to 10 and the x to 4. Change this to multiply. Then we'll hit compile and save that. Add a sequence off our second sequence here. Add a delay. And then destroy the actor. Okay, so I had to play around with our weapon impact blueprint here. I made a couple changes using the same field system component for each of these apply physics fields, as well as I got the world location from that same field system component. And then I apply the physics field. And as well as here, I have them all hooked up to this one field system component. I also changed this to multiply right here for the set operator field. Linear velocity, angular torque, all of that. I adjusted my strain magnitude to 50,000, my force magnitude to 5,000. In my viewports, I adjusted the size of my spear collision to 50. And yeah, that's pretty much all of the changes that I did here. Again, you can just look at all the different changes I did here. So if we go ahead and go to our first person projectile, off of our event hit, we're going to spawn actor from class. Going to select our weapon impact blueprint, and then our hit location, hook that up to the spawn transform, and then after that we can destroy actor. If you hit play now, we can shoot the ball and it breaks the column just like that. Shoot the pieces, and you can also adjust the weapon impact, the strain and force magnitude, but if you select the geometry as well, you can also adjust the damage threshold here, which I did play around with. So we can go ahead and actually bring this down a little bit. So you can see parts of it are flying off like that. And what we can also do is go ahead and rotate this back like so. Actually, what I'm going to go ahead and do is make this anchor field transparent. So if we go into our viewports here and change this material out to view options, use engine content, show engine content right here. You can search here simple translucent and use that material to represent our anchor so that we can actually get a better visualization of everything. So now we can actually go ahead and start creating, like say if we wanted to make a pillar here or a column, we can go ahead and select both our anchor and our column and Alt click to duplicate and drag it. And then here we have to set up our anchor, remember, so select your geometry, select the anchor right here. We can take this piece of geometry, move it up, change our grid snapping to 50, then Alt drag these up. Should snap just like that. Okay, we can rotate it here and move it just like that. If we were to hit play, everything would just crumble right here, this top part. Basically, we're going to build a connection between these pieces here. And to do that, what you're going to do is we're actually going to go ahead and move this a little bit closer. And we're going to select all these geometry pieces and change the cluster group index to like 3. So basically this tells which index it's a part of. So all of the assets that are in the group cluster index of 3 will be part of the same geometry or the same like building structure. So if we hit play, nothing's going to fall down. And you see that top part doesn't have any anchors because it's connected to these pillars right here. So if we go ahead and shatter part of that, you're going to see it crumbles like that. And let's go ahead and actually adjust the damage threshold because we don't want it breaking apart so easily. Tweak these up a little bit. Actually, you might as well just select all of these and change the values. So let's up this up to like 20,000, 17,000. And so we can actually go ahead and duplicate this geometry, snap them together just like so. Make sure the group index is 3 as well. And then make sure this is actually anchored to that proper anchor. So if we hit play, we can start breaking some of the pieces here. As you see, our frame rate is dropping because we need to adjust the damage threshold of some of these items here. Really, you just got to mess around with the values and find which values work for you. Now, obviously, if you have a lot of rigid bodies and if you're having just a lot of destruction going on, you're going to want to have what is called a sleep field, which I haven't covered in this video, but basically, just like the anchor field, you'd set it to sleep or to kill, and it basically stopped the simulation of these rigid bodies. So as you can see, they're kind of glitching on the floor right now because they're still simulating, and it's still costing us our memory. So if you add sleep fields on the bottom, it's going to catch the pieces and stop them from simulating. So it just helps out with optimization. So anyways, guys, I hope this was a good Chaos Basics tutorial. Again, I'll have to make some more tutorials on some of the other fields as well as some of the other features that Chaos has. Maybe we'll go ahead and, make a building out of these destructible assets. So that'll be really exciting to do. So anyways, guys, if you like this video, make sure you hit the like button, and I'll see you guys in the next one.